Hey guys, Aaron CybertronVGC here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked, where I climb the online regulation VGC ladder in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and provide live commentary as I go. In this video, I wanted to feature a team centered around Okidogi. This Pokemon can be an absolute setup monster. This set in particular uses Bulk Up as well as Leftovers, Drain Punch, and Knockoff, so you're able to sustain for a long period of time while also dealing damage and removing items via Knockoff. It's also supported by things like Dual Screens, Light Clay, Grimmsnarl, as well as Hisuian Arcanine for Intimidate, and Okidogi's ability Guard Dog is amazing because immunity to Intimidate is just so valuable, and with Landorus Therian being one of the most common Pokemon in the format right now, being immune to that and getting an attack boost if you are intimidated is super nice. As always, I'll do a quick breakdown of the team, but if you want to skip to the battles, check out the timestamps down below, and thanks so much as always for joining me. If you enjoyed, would really appreciate it if you consider leaving a like in the video or subscribing to the channel. It really helps out a ton. Anyway, let's get started. Breaking things down, as always, rental, pace, and team creator are linked down in the description below. And question of the day, I want to know what you think about the Loyal 3 trio in competitive VGC. I think when they first came out, a lot of players thought that they just didn't really have too much potential, but after playing some games with all of them, I think that they all can have a niche place in the format. So curious about your opinions and which ones you think will be the best and what sets you've been trying out. Now, the first Pokemon to highlight here, of course, is the Okidogi. This Pokemon is interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, its ability Guard Dog is really nice because it gives you immunity to Intimidate and you get an attack boost if you are intimidated. That's a big deal because Landorus Therian is one of the most common Pokemon in the format, and other intimidators like Arcanine, Hisuian Arcanine, and Gyarados are still being used as well. So to be able to punish those Pokemon in particular is really nice. And if you look at this team, for example, you've got Ogerpon, right? So part of the idea of having Ogerpon is that it baits the intimidators. Ogerpon is just such a strong Pokemon, especially when you go for the Terra with it. But if you are an Intimidate user and you're trying to shut down Ogerpon, you might end up giving a free attack boost to the Okidogi. So it's one of those things in team building where just having the presence of this in team preview makes your opponents want to bring Intimidate more, but then this Pokemon can thrive from it. Hisuian Arcanine, by the way, also on this team, also a strong offensive attacker, and so people love bringing Landorus T against these two in particular, and Okidogi can thrive from that, for example. The general idea behind this set, though, is that you stay on the field for a really long time. You're going to click Bulk Up very frequently. Often I've gotten 2, 3, maybe even 4 Bulk Ups throughout the course of a game, and it's designed around supporting Okidogi, because you've got Grimmsnarl with screen support and the Light Clay, as well as Hisuian Arcanine for Intimidate. So one common lead, for example, is just Grimmsnarl plus Okidogi, go for a parting shot after you set up your screens, go for Bulk Ups, and then this Pokemon just becomes really difficult to knock out, especially with Drain Punch and Leftovers recovery adding up pretty quickly as well. Knockoff is your other offensive option on this Pokemon, and the idea behind Knockoff is that it's just consistent damage, and being able to remove items in this format is amazing, right? So you could go for something like a poison type attack, but I think Knockoff just has good coverage across the board and is able to hit a lot of Pokemon for really significant damage. The last thing to note here is that you've got Dragon Terra. Dragon Terra has become increasingly more popular in Regulation E because of the presence of Ogerpon. Specifically, being able to resist fire, water, and grass with Dragon is really critical. So even though this does make you weak to things like Ice as well as Fairy, it's really helpful in a format where Ogerpon is so heavily prioritized right now. Grimmsnarl here is pretty straightforward, dual screens, parting shot, plus the Spirit Break with Ghost Terra, and the general idea, of course, is to just set up your screens. This becomes a very common lead for this team, especially if your opponent doesn't have Fake Out on turn 1, or a Fake Out user, for example. You can so easily lead Grimmsnarl, set up one screen, set up the other screen, and then parting shot on turn 3. So, like I said, Grimmsnarl plus Okidogi, really common combination. To round things out, you've got fairly standard set. This is a Choice Specs Flutter Mane. I think the one thing to note is that Flutter Mane's Terra type has really switched across the board throughout Scarlet and Violet VGC. For example, we've seen Fairy Terra being used just offensively. We've seen defensive Terras like Grass, Water, and Steel, for example. And so this is a switch back to Water Terra, specifically to give you resistance into Water Urshifu, for example. It also gives you resistance to Heavy Slam from something like Iron Hands, which can be pretty valuable, and it's a fairly straightforward set. The one thing to note is that you've actually got Power Gem here, which is really valuable against Fire Ogerpon, as you're able to threaten it with super effective damage and potentially just knock it out. So it's, this fourth move often is flex move that can be teched, and you'll see something like Thunderbolt occasionally, even Trick Room, but Power Gem here just improves your Fire Ogerpon matchup. Finally, to round things out, you've got Water, Terra, Choice Scarf, Urshifu. This is really standard. The main thing to note here is that you've got U-Turn, for example. So U-Turn is pretty cool because it means you can do something like lead Urshifu plus Okidogi or Urshifu plus Grimmsnarl, and then like U-Turn out while setting up screens, and then conserve this as a late game monster with Water, Terra plus Searching Strikes to close out the game. So it just means that you have better pivoting with this Pokemon and allows you to lead Urshifu with a little bit more ease. Finally, to round things out, you've got Ogerpon. Ogerpon is really interesting. I think this is just one of the most common Pokemon in the format right now, but all of the Ogerpon forms are viable. Fire and Water right now feel a little bit more common, and this is just an offensive set. As you see, triple attack with Ivy Cudgel, Horn Leech, Stomping Tantrum, and Spiky Shield, and the main idea behind Ogerpon is to just apply a lot of offensive pressure and hopefully bait those Intimidators to come out so that Okidogi can get that Guard Dog activated. But this Pokemon is just an absolute menace and does huge amounts of damage, right? So can put in a lot of work. The last Pokemon is Hisuian Arcanine, and this is a fairly standard Assault Vest set. It's very invested in attack and speed, so a little bit less bulk than you might be used to if you've been using Hisuian Arcanine before. And you've got Fairy, Terra, Terra Blast, which allows you to hit things like Fighting-type Pokemon for super effective damage, otherwise fairly straightforward with Flare Blitz, Extreme Speed, Rock Slide. In terms of ways with playing with the team, I generally first ask myself if I can bring Okidogi into the matchup. Do I feel like it has the ability to just set up multiple bulk ups? For example, it's really valuable against teams that are a little bit slower paced and more passive because those teams generally can't deal a lot of burst damage to threaten this immediately. So in games that I go with Okidogi, I generally go with Grimm, Okidogi, Arcanine, and then one of these three as the final Pokemon, but you can just lean into the offense of this team, right? Even though this is a team that's very heavily centered around Okidogi, you don't necessarily need to bring it. You have a really strong offensive core of Urshifu, Flutter, Ogerpon, and Arcanine, and you can really combine those in any way, but for example, I think Urshifu plus Fluttermane as a lead in particular applies a ton of offensive pressure. Urshifu, really any of these, applies a lot of pressure, and I think my go-to Okidogi leads are generally Grimmsnarl Okidogi or Arcanine plus Okidogi, where I either pressure with screens immediately or Arcanine for Intimidate, and then I can, for example, pivot Arcanine out. One of the common scenarios is when I think my opponent's going to lead Fake Out plus something like a Knockout Grimmsnarl. I generally will actually bring Grimmsnarl in the back, lead Okidogi with something like Arcanine, and then turn 1 Protect, for example, pivot Arcanine into Grimmsnarl, then set up screens in the subsequent turn. So those are just some things to consider, but you have a lot of offense across the board. Okidogi is actually generally going to be the weakest option on this team until it gets a couple of boosts up, so don't forget the amount of pure damage that you can have from things like Flutter, Urshifu, Ogerpon, and Hisuian Arcanine. But my goal with this episode is to really showcase how good Okidogi can be in particular, so I'm eager to bring it out. Now, in terms of weaknesses, I think the first thing to note is that Okidogi takes a little bit of time to get set up, right? So if your opponent has a lot of immediate offense that can burst through Okidogi before it really is able to get those couple bulk ups off and start healing with Drain Punch, that can be a big problem. In addition, Poison and Fighting is kind of an awkward typing because Psychic does hit it for super effective damage. That being said, I don't think Psychic is, for example, the most common offensive typing, but if you're up against Psychic type Pokemon or Pokemon that get access to Psychic type moves, something like Cresselia with Psychic, for example, you have to be a little bit more wary. And Dragon Terra is obviously really good against things like Ogerpon, but it opens new weaknesses to things like Chien-Pao as well as Fluttermane, so you want to be careful about that. One other thing to consider is that, the Okidogi, even with bulk ups, can still get crit. So critical hits in general just kind of stink when you're using this set, but if you're up against something like Urshifu in particular, getting those guaranteed crits can be pretty scary as well. And you can go for Dragon Terra, obviously, against Water Urshifu, but then you're like committing your Terra, and you're not necessarily doing that much damage in return as well, and just like Urshifu being able to ignore those defense boosts from bulk up, for example, is also kind of scary. So that's one thing to think about. I think one way to deal with Grimmsnarl is just leading something like Fake Out plus a way to just knock out it immediately. You can Ghost Terra to get around that, but for example, an Iron Hands Flutter mainly just puts on a lot of offensive pressure against this slot immediately. And if Grimmsnarl goes down without setting up screens, it is a complete disaster. I think Amoonguss is actually really scary for this team to go up against as well. Ogerpon's going to be your only real answer for Amoonguss because there's no Grass Terra and anything else. There's no Safety Goggles, and there's no Taunt. So, I think Arcanine and Ogerpon both put on offensive pressure against Amoonguss, but Amoonguss can then go for a defensive Terra, and a single Spore can really shut you down with this team, especially because you don't have Protect on Arcanine, Urshifu, Fluttermane, or Grimmsnarl. So it's not like you can just protect a Pokemon easily and then pivot into your Fire type to put on pressure against Amoonguss. So I've had some trouble against Amoonguss in particular, especially when there is a strong Water type Pokemon next to it, for example. And I think generally, the games where I've struggled is just where I can't really do very much with Okidogi, but then my other Pokemon just aren't able to get big one-hit KOs, and then they get overwhelmed with offense. The other thing to think about is that you don't have speed control with this team, so keep that in mind because there's a decent chance your opponents will just outpace you, and that opens the door for secondary effects like critical hits or flinches, for example. So, yeah. That's it for a breakdown, though. Let's get into these games. Okay, we've got Roaring Moon, Fire Ogerpon, Landorus, Flutter, Milotic, and Iron Hands. So I think Okidogi is really interesting here, especially because they've got Landorus. You can use Grim to set up screens, but if they want to deny screens, you can lead Iron Hands and Flutter main. Hands Flutter's pretty annoying, but his Hisuian Arcanine's pretty good against that. I guess the question is, if I lead Hisuian Arcanine, what if they just go with the Milotic right away? That would be pretty annoying. But I think if you're my opponent, would you really lead Milotic when Grim is a potential option from my end? Probably not, I would think. So I think I want Hisuian Arcanine. What do I want in the back? I think we can go Grim plus Specs Flutter. I don't know how good Fire Ogerpon is here. Into Roaring Moon. Barrel and Ogerpon as well. Yeah, I like Flutter more. Okay, let's try this out. It's a little bit risky to be leading Hisuian Arcanine into a matchup with Milotic, but I don't know if my opponent really should be leading Milotic here. And if they do, props to them. That's just a risk that I'm willing to take in the beginning of this game. And the main reason for that is because my opponent should see that I have Grimmsnarl, so I think they want to lead in a way to deny me screens immediately. So like Iron Hands Flutter would be the perfect lead for that. Yep, there we go. Cool. So this is good because I get an immediate Intimidate off onto Iron Hands. So what do you want to consider doing here? You can click Fake Out onto either slot, obviously. Could be a Drain Punch into this slot. Double up onto this slot. I think I'm actually okay going for something like Protect and then hard pivot out into Grimmsnarl. Because the whole point is we want to get our screens up. And then what I can do this next turn is Light Screen plus Bulk Up. Okay, so Grim pivots in. We're going to Protect. Let's see if they launched Fake Out into either slot. Yep. Fake Out Moonblast, maybe? Okay, it's just Dazzling Gleam. That's fine. Yeah, we survived that. Cool. They do have more physical attackers, but I think because we have Bulk Up, I'm happy to Bulk Up here and Light Screen. Like, I'm not going to be able to get Light Screen and Reflect up in this game, but I think just getting one of the two is good enough for me. And now we can start setting up. Okay, they actually go for Moonblast. Cool. So I get Bulk Up off. Curious if Iron Hands doubled up into that slot, but you're at -1 attack, and I have +1 defense. But it's going to be Heavy Slam into Grip. Okay, that makes sense. So it's not Choice Specs on Flutter either, which is good to confirm. Given this, what do I want to bring out now? Could go into my own Flutter, force a Terra from their end. I don't think we really need a Dragon Terra this. Could also just go back into Hisuian Arcanine. I'm thinking about going into Flutter. The question is, who do they Terra? Okay, you know what? I'll go into Arcanine. Get another Intimidate off into Iron Hands, which is good. This Arcanine is admin 196 attack EVs. Flutter main's bulky. I would expect it to survive Flare Blitz. They don't have a Drain Punch switch in really, though. So I'm down to go for Drain Punch onto Iron Hands. And then Flare Blitz into Flutter main. Yeah, like Moonblast is still doing a sizable amount onto Okidogi. So, yep. Hands pivots out. And they're going to bring out Landorus. Okay. Landorus actually is a switch it into the Drain Punch, but it does activate the Guard Dog here. So I'll take that. And they actually go for Shadow Ball into Hisuian Arcanine, which is fine by me. Yeah, that barely does anything. Cool. So I get Flare Blitz off. Really good damage there. And Drain Punch at +2 does decent damage. But more importantly, it gets us a pretty critical recovery here. So right now, my opponent has Landorus, Iron Hands. We have this defense boost. If I Terra, I become weak to Moonblast, which is a little bit awkward. I don't know the item on Landorus here either. Like, they could just Moonblast here and then Stomping Tantrum into Arcanine. Late game Flutter on my end's looking pretty strong. This Flutter is modest 100 speed EVs. And we're Fairy Terra. Arcanine's decently speedy here. I don't want to commit my Terra yet, so I think I would prefer to Protect here. And Flare Blitz again. If we knock out Flutter Mane, I think it opens the door for Okidogi to sweep, or Okidogi to sweep the team. Okay, so there's Scarflander with Rock Slide. That's good to know. I'm actually really okay with that. Yeah, you don't KO me. Maybe a Moonblast or Gleam? Yeah, I don't know if Gleam even KOs. Probably does, but I don't know. Assault Vest? Is there any chance we survive? Oh my gosh, we actually did survive. And no flinch. That's an amazing trade. Okay, cool. So Flutter is eliminated, which now opens the door for Dragon Terra from our end. The main reason to not Terra was fear of, obviously, something like the Dazzling Gleam or Moonblast doing super effective damage. So in that position, I was willing to even lose Arcanine to get a free switch into my Flutter Mane. Because even though I'd be down 2-4, like, we have +2 attack, +1 defense on this, and Light Screen set up. I would assume they bring Iron Hands back out. I think what's interesting is if you bring out the Iron Hands, we know that the Landorus is Choice Scarf locked right now, so it's not too much of a problem. And I think my question is, do I want a Terra? I think Iron Hands going for a Terra here makes a lot of sense. Ogre Palm being the last one on their end makes sense to me as well. Honestly, Landorus is in a really awkward spot because, like, Rock Slide's not really doing much here. I think they would have been a lot better off if they locked into, like, Stomping. Yeah, like, I'm honestly happy to bulk up again. The question is, do I use my Terra here immediately? Because I could see them going for Heavy Slam onto Flutter Mane. Yeah, I think I'm going to Terra defensively here. And Dazzling Gleam. Okay, they're going to stay in with Landorus. So the main scary thing right now is Rock Slide flinches potentially from their end. But I'm hoping it's just Rock Slide plus Heavy Slam. And then if they Terra their Iron Hands defensively, we can just go for a knockoff or Drain Punch onto that slot. Yep, there's the defensive Terra. Water, fire, grass. Let's see which one it is. Grass. Okay, works for me. Yeah, I mean, I'll be getting a +3 knockoff into that slot next turn. So they're going to go for Rock Slide, mainly trying to avoid the flinches right now. Flutter Mane does flinch, but we do get another bulk up off. Okay. I think this thing legitimately could 1v3 my opponent's team in this endgame as well, so flinch is unfortunate, but let's see what they launched. Yep, it is Heavy Slam. Okay, cool. So I should survive another Heavy Slam right now, which is big. I'm not sure Specs Dazzle actually gets the KO onto Landorus, so I think I might want to Moonblast instead. Alternatively, I think we can just go for knockoff. And Moonblast double up into Iron Hands to KO that. But I do think the fear of flinch is pretty scary, so I don't mind just eliminating Landorus here. Landorus could switch, I suppose. But nope, they're just going to click Rock Slide again, okay? Flutter survives. No flinch this time, cool. Specs Moonblast gets that knockout. And now our little dog is perfectly set up for this endgame, in my opinion. I do get flinched again, but that's why you use Scarf Landorus with Rock Slide. Your flinch chances are just so strong. But I'm at +3 attack, +2 defense with this, with Drain Punch, so I should win the 1v1 against Iron Hands. So let's see what their last Pokemon is. Milotic, Ogerpon, or Roaring Moon. None of those are really that scary. I guess Roaring Moon with Acrobatics is probably the scariest, but the thing is you can't tear it, so I could just Drain Punch you. And it's Milotic, okay. I guess the one scary thing about Milotic is it can burn. So we can just go for knockoff. Wait, does Milotic still get access to Scald? I actually haven't used it at all in this format. Because I thought they re-added Scald back in the DLC, but I actually might just be wrong on that. I'm going to double check. Let's see, Milotic. Oh yeah, it does have Scald. Okay. So I think that's the one scary thing right now, being burnt, but otherwise I think they shouldn't be able to do enough damage to us. The knockoff does so much to them there. Get rid of leftovers. They just go for Ice Beam, so yeah, does it not have Scald anymore? Milotic, checking Picolytics. Nope, it does. Okay, wait, so why didn't they Scald? That was weird. I guess they're playing towards a freeze instead as a win condition, which makes some sense to me. Okay. But now I can just Drain Punch. Like, Iron Hands basically needs a critical hit in order to win this. And Milotic is a little bit scarier with the secondary effects from moves like Ice Beam and Scald. So, we'll eliminate Milotic, and then it's 1v1 against Iron Hands. I'll just Protect, and then Drain Punch, Drain Punch. We don't even really need to go for a knockoff, because, like, I'd rather have the recovery so that even if they crit Wild Charge, they can't win the game. But yeah, Okidogi was amazing in this game, especially because they brought the Landorus. I think what helped was hard calling my opponent's lead correctly, and then also the turn where they ended up clicking or locking into Rock Slide with Landorus rather than something like Stomping Tantrum. I think Stomping would have been a better pick because it would have knocked out the Arcanine and would have put on more offensive pressure into the dog as well. Good Protect by Milotic here. The thing with the Protect here is it just opens the door a little bit more for a critical hit from Iron Hands, but what I didn't want to do was Protect with my Okidogi and then have the Milotic be able to go for really any setup oriented move, like Coil for example is a move, Recover is a move, and so yeah, I didn't want it to have the opportunity to do that. And you see, like, Wild Charge isn't really doing that much to us, right? So the one downside here is it gives my opponent an extra turn to get a critical hit, but we should be very well positioned. They could go for a double Protect right now, but I don't think I really want to read into them going for the double. It's like the odds of a crit are really slim here, so if a crit happens, so be it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to play around it, and they don't go for the double. Perfect. Cool. Yeah, I think Leftovers plus Screens plus a boosting move is just such a strong combination. And there are a lot of different ways you can run this Pokemon, but I think Drain Punch plus Knockoff is just an incredible duo. Like, Knockoff, being able to get rid of items and also deal so much damage is so key. Cool, so they just go for another Wild Charge. I feel like it probably is Assault Vest on the Iron Hands. But I think Drain Punch should heal us enough where even if they crit, they can't KO us. And 2 Drain Punches I would think get the knockout. If not, Drain Punch and a knockoff definitely will. What also helped in this game was that my opponent did end up bringing that Landorus, so it activated our ability as well. And look how much damage that does. Knockoff, I think, actually would have just gotten the KO. Wow. Incredible. We heal all the way back to full HP. Yep, here's just another Wild Charge. Cool. And that does 40 damage. Perfect, perfect, perfect. And we heal back again. So I feel like this was honestly a perfect demonstration of this Pokemon, right? Like, it stayed in the field the entire game since turn 1 and never fainted, and was able to just keep boosting up. Yeah, I could have gone for knockoff there, I think, to get the knockout, but I wasn't sure about the damage calc onto Iron Hands there. We were at +3 attack, though, so it's a pretty strong attack, but I was just gauging off the damage onto Milotic. Milotic very likely was just max HP, max defense in that position, so yeah. But this Okidogi, honestly, with the ability, is such an intriguing Pokemon, and its ability to deal significant damage while also sustaining via Drain Punch recovery and Leftovers is an awesome combination, and the screen support is really valuable in just allowing it to survive for even longer periods of time. I am smiling right now because I see 2 Intimidators are my opponent's team, and that's an amazing, amazing, amazing for Okidogi. I think the main concerning thing here is the Blood Moon being a special attacker, but otherwise their team is pretty much physical. They do have Cresselia, so Psychic actually hurts. And they have Iron Hands. If they want to set up Trick Room, you can go something like Iron Hands Cresselia. Could be Cresselia plus Blood Moon lead. I don't mind leading Grimmsnarl on this one because you don't have immediate offense to just KO Grimmsnarl. What do I think about Ogre Pawn? It's okay. I mean, Blood Moon Hyper Voice Pressure is scary, but I think we might want to consider Hisuian Arcanine as a result with the Assault Vest. But I don't want to lead that because of Annihilate. Maybe it is just Grim plus Okidogi, honestly, and just start setting up. I don't think I want Scarf Urshifu in a Trick Room-oriented matchup. I think my main debate is, do I bring Ogre Pawn here? It's a pretty effective late-game sweeper, but I think Okidogi is just so much stronger. So I'm going to go Flutter Hisuian Arcanine. Yeah, I think, like, Water Urshifu doesn't look that great here because my opponent's team is really bulky. They have the Gyarados, which is an amazing switch-in, and they're a slower-paced team with Trick Room, so it's like the Choice Scarf doesn't really add that much value, and if Trick Room goes up, I think the Urshifu is just very useless. So I'm going to try to just set up screens and just click Bulk Up a couple times and go from there. That's going to be Iron Hands and the Blood Moon. Okay. What do I want to do here? I'm really a little bit scared about this. I could Ghost Terra. I actually think Ghost Terraing isn't the worst idea here. But it means a late Cresselia could cause some problems for this. Mainly curious about the item on this as well. Like, I think I'd prefer to Light Screen plus Protect on turn 1 here. Okay, they don't Terra. Nice. Yeah, I was going to say, if you don't Terra, then I think you need to click Fake Out onto that slot, because otherwise I pressure you with the Fighting type attack onto Blood Moon. So we get Light Screen. Perfect. Oh, that was amazing. Yeah, this is the amount of pressure that we can apply with this. So now what I can do, this is amazing. I can just Parting Shot into you and go for a Bulk Up. And then I'll probably just pivot out Hisuian Arcanine right now to get Intimidate onto the Iron Hands. I could have set up Reflect here, but I think getting Blood Moon's damage output significantly reduced early on is really critical here. I'm also curious what Terra type they are. I've seen a lot of normal and Ghost Terras on Blood Moon. Blood Moon actually pivots. Ooh, is it a Annihilate coming out? That'd be pretty sick. No, that's Gyarados. I actually should have considered Annihilate as a switch in there, because then I actually would have super activated Defiant. But yeah, I think this puts me in a immediately winning position. I actually don't really see how they can deal with us anymore at this point, because you just activated Defiant. Alright, not Defiant, our ability, Guard Dog. Yeah, this is a free pivot into Hisuian Arcanine, get the Intimidate onto Iron Hands, and then I can just pivot Arcanine back out into Grimmsnarl next turn. Beautiful. Annihilate was the one Pokemon I was really worried about after Blood Moon, and now I think we're just so well positioned. +2 attack, +1 defense, Light Screen is set up. Yeah, they just Heavy Slam into Grim. Beautiful. Okay. I think here I'm happy to pivot back out into Grimmsnarl. I wonder if +2 knockoff just KOs Gyarados. Gyarados is really bulky, so honestly might survive. I could go for another Bulk Up. I think the one thing I'm worried about is like Thunder Wave from this onto here. I might actually stay in and attack then and just go for something like Rock Slide and Knockoff. Yeah. We miss. Okay, but that's on Iron Hands. That's fine. Cool. Beautiful. Oh, it actually doesn't get the KO, though. Wow. They're Rocky Helmet, so probably max HP, max defense. But they just launch Waterfall into us, which is fine. Like, I'm willing to lose Arcanine here, because right now the most important Pokemon is just Okidogi. And they just Drain Punch for, yeah, no damage. I could have switched there, but basically what I was worried about was like Thunder Wave going off into that slot, which causes some problems. I think now what I can do is bring out Flutter Mane. Yeah. And with Flutter Mane, I think what I can do is defensively Terra into water so that Heavy Slam doesn't KO us. Dazzling Gleam. And I would assume that they're going to Terra with Iron Hand so I can knock off into this slot. I think alternatively I can go for another bulk up as well. Yeah, it's a pretty free opportunity to bulk up again. Let's go for that, because I'm not sure I get the knockout anyway. I am surprised that Gyarados survived the Rock Slide plus knockoff double up, but like I said, it's probably just max HP, max defense EVs, especially with that Rocky Helmet. That Rocky Helmet, by the way, is exactly why I didn't want to bring the Urshifu into this matchup. Yep. Okay, we bait out the Terra from Iron Hands. Good. Let's see what type it is going to be. Fairy Terra. Ooh, wait, Fairy Terra is actually really interesting. That is going to cause some problems for us. And Gyarados has Protect. Okay. The main reason Fairy Terra causes problems is because I don't do nearly as much damage into it. But that's okay because we'll generally win the 1v1. And Dazzling actually still does pretty decent damage there. Yeah, we'll win the 1v1 because of Bulk Up and Drain Punch plus Leftovers Recovery. So my goal is to just target around the Iron Hands at this point. And yep, they go for Heavy Slam. Perfect. That was a crit. That's fine. Okay. The main thing here is I just don't see a response from their end into this slot at this point, right? Cresselia is like the one thing that's a little bit scary, but we can just click knock off onto that slot. So I'm happy to just Dazzling Gleam now and then knock off. And I'm happy to target the Gyarados slot in case they switch out. I think you should give up Gyarados here, though. There's very little reason to switch out. In fact, if I were my opponent, I would go for a double Protect there. But Dazzle does so much damage. Is that not Assault Vest Iron Hands, then? We're doing a lot more with Dazzle than I would expect, but let's see. Nope, it is Assault Vest. Okay. Maybe just not that much special defense investment. They're going to go for Wild Charge here, but the Water Terra Flutter has been amazing, specifically to deal with Iron Hands to take that Heavy Slam. I don't think they fade from recoil here, right? Yeah, they survived with the Sliver, but I think we're perfectly set up. In a meta where people do like to use Intimidate, like we've had Define activate twice already in our 2 games, and this Pokemon has just stayed on the field, you can see how much value it has against all these physically oriented Pokemon. Okay, and Cresselia indeed is my opponent's last one. Okay. So I think the one thing to probably worry about from this is Ally Switch, which is fine. I've already set up Light Screen. I'm happy to just Spirit Break here into hands and Knockoff into Cresselia, because I think Knockoff just clears the game at this point. And there's no Ally Switch, which is perfect. Okay, Cresselia survives the knockoff, though. So maybe I needed to double up onto that slot. That would have actually guaranteed me the game immediately. Because now, how much does your Psychic do into us? Like, we have Light Screen up, so... Oh, they actually just Trick Room. Okay. Yeah, a double up on a Cresselia would have won the game for sure. I think, like, in this game, everything's just been a little bit bulkier than I anticipated. But that's fine. Yeah, I think we just need to expect to not do as much damage. So Blood Moon comes out. I don't even know if you have Psychic, but the main thing is I open, like, the door for my opponent to go for Psychic there, which is a little bit concerning. I think here I'm actually happy to just Spirit Break and Protect. Knock out Cresselia. And then we'll just win the 1v1 against Blood Moon because I can just Parting Shot it. Yeah, I don't think Iron Hands was actually a threat to us at all, so I think it was always better to double up on a Cresselia. If they ally switch, so be it, right? Like, Spirit Break gets directed into that slot, so... Blood Moon into us here, yep. And Spirit Break here just should get the KO. Okay, good. Now I just Parting Shot plus Drain Punch. Cool. Grim outspeeding there also helps, so I don't have to really worry about getting damaged by it. But Parting Shot, Drain Punch here should cover us. You have already committed your Terra to Iron Hands, so you can't go for something like a Ghost Terra here. Now -1 special attack with Light Screen up. They need a crit here, basically, but they actually just opt for Hyper Voice, so even if you crit there, that wasn't going to get a KO. I don't even know if a crit Blood Moon gets the knockout onto us there, but yeah, this is just another game where we stay on the field for practically the entire game, set up, and there's nothing our opponent can really do. So I do think we've had some pretty advantageous team matchups so far, especially going up against two teams that both have Intimidate, which activated our guard dog, as well as the lack of like special attackers on my opponent's team. But I think this game, there's two turns I can really point to that could have gone a little bit better for us. The turn was when I didn't knock out Gyarados and Waterfall just knocked out the Arcanine, because Arcanine is a pretty offensive member of this team. So like I said, I was thinking of pivoting out into Grimmsnarl, but I was worried about getting paralyzed and then like my opponent can go for like Thunder Wave into Okidogi and then like Waterfall. And so what I wanted to do was essentially, yeah, try to deny that outright. But in this game, because of the amount of defensive bulk they had, like the Gyarados and Cresselia were actually able to survive with a sliver of HP. I think because they didn't end up going for Thunder Wave that turn, it ended up working out okay. But yeah, I didn't have a way to immediately burst down Gyarados. The best way would have been to have pivot in Flutter Mane, but there was no safe way to actually get that in, I think. And then the other turn was Cresselia. I think I would have preferred to have just doubled up onto that slot. I do want to do the damage calc because, like, a lot of Cresselias don't even run Psychic, like you run Moonblast, Trick Room, Ally Switch, and Lunar Blessing, for example, but offensive Cresselia with Psychic did actually win the last Regulation D Regional Championship, and so I'm curious if Psychic just gets the knockout through Light Screen there, because if it doesn't, I think we're still okay, but I still would have taken a ton of damage, which doesn't feel great. So I actually want to pull up that damage code, because I think that turn, even though it ended up working out okay for us because they set up Trick Room, I didn't need to show that much respect to Iron Hands because Iron Hands just loses 1v1 against the Okidogi. I just thought Knockoff would be a guaranteed knockout onto that Cresselia, so doubling up with Knockoff plus Spirit Break would have been a better play, that would have won me the game for sure. Whereas, like, even though it ended up working out okay for me, that turn wasn't optimally played, and yeah, like, there are things that could have gone wrong there, like critical hit Psychic, for example, on Tower slot. So, pulling up the damage calc here, Psychic from this offensive Cresselia EV spread, which won the Pittsburgh Regional Championships, never gets a one-hit knockout onto us unless you get a critical hit. So, that's good to know. Wasn't at risk of just immediately getting knocked out, really, and that makes me feel a little bit better. But that being said, I think it still opens the door for a critical hit, and crits are a complete nightmare for this team. And so it would have felt really bad to lose that game to a crit there, just because I felt like I had played well enough and positioned well throughout that entire game. In the end, I don't know if they even had Psychic, but I think that's something that I do generally want to assume on Cresselias, especially because this was a meta shift that we saw towards the end of Regulation D. So one thing that I was thinking about is if they did go for Psychic, but they didn't get the crit, then what would the end game look like? You know, we get the knockout on Iron Hands, you're at 10% with Cresselia, you bring out the Blood Moon, and then I can probably just Drain Punch Blood Moon plus Spirit Break Cresselia the subsequent turn. But I guess one thing that was interesting was the fact that they were faster with Cresselia, so slower under Trick Room, so then I guess you could bring out Blood Moon and actually protect it. So then maybe actually instead of going for Drain Punch immediately, I would protect my Okidogi and then just Spirit Break and then play the game from there. So yeah. Okay, we've got Torn, Urshifu, Cresselia, Hands, Ogerpon, and Amoonguss. A lot of physical attackers again, but obviously the Urshifu can crit through us, which is concerning. I'm worried about Amoonguss in general as well. Yeah, Amoonguss is a pretty big problem. We don't have any Grass Terras either. So the best answer for Amoonguss is probably just Ogerpon. So I think Ogerpon needs to come out in this one. If I were my opponent, though, I think something like Tornadus Urshifu lead is really scary. You can just go for Rain Dance Surging Strikes immediately. That is really concerning, actually. Actually, so I think we need to utilize either Dragon Terra on this or Water Terra on Flutter Mane. I think Water Terra is actually really critical here. So I'm thinking of leading Grim, Flutter, Ogerpon in the back, because I need to switch it into Amoonguss and then Okidogi. I think Urshifu is really interesting here, and I think his Hisuian Arcanine is also not bad. Hisuian Arcanine really good into a, Amoonguss, Tornadus, Iron Hands, but I think the most threatening Pokemon on my opponent's team is Urshifu, so I want to do my best to counter it as much as possible. And with Flutter Mane, I can just Water Terra immediately, for example, which is good. But it's Hands Amoonguss. Okay. I'm not sure I love this. I'm definitely going to be pivoting in Ogerpon here, I think. But the question is, who do I stay in with? Okay, I think I go into Ogerpon and Reflect. I need to potentially conserve my Terra on Flutter for Water Urshifu in this end game. Yeah, they didn't go for Fake Out. Might just be Heavy Slam. Okay, Volt Switch is fine. But now you can bring out Urshifu. Yep. Okay, they did Spore into us at least, which is good. So I can Horn Leech into this slot. I mean, I basically have to accept that I'm getting Spored here. I guess this might protect, but if I expect it to protect and it doesn't, it's really bad. So I'd like to Horn Leech here, I think, and then just set up Light Screen. Alright, they go for a Terra, but who's Terra-ing? Is it a Mungus? No, it's Urshifu. Does Surging Strikes just KO us? If so, like, I have such little counterplay to this. Okay, they go for Rage Powder. That's fine. Get Light Screen up. This is just KO Ogerpon. It's close. Oh my gosh, it's so close. I think they do get the knockout with the higher roll here. Oh. Basically, yeah, because Horn Leech would have ignored the Rage Powder there because we're Grass type. So that's the setup that I was looking for. But I honestly think I just lose off that. Yeah, each hit was doing... It felt like... I'm curious about actually... I'm going to do the damage calc about that after this game. But if we survive that and I get the Horn Leech off, this is a completely different game. Because then I just heal back so much. I couldn't Terra there, though, because obviously it would just turn me into fire. Yeah. It's like the combination... I led in a way that wasn't ideal because I was covering for Tornadus plus Urshifu lead. Whereas, for example, if I led Ogerpon, I would have been able to put on a little bit more offensive pressure on a Mungus slot. And it's really hard for Okidogi to get set up in this game. So I'll bring out Flutter. But at this point, I don't really see a clear way of winning. I can Water Terra here. And then Dazzling Gleam. And switch out, but we don't have that many Amoonguss answers to begin with. Ogerpon is our best bet, and with them having Water Terra and actually being able to just one-shot Ogerpon and outspeed it, our options are pretty limited in this battle, because you just get to crit through the screens, right? Maybe I could have just led Okidogi and just, like, click Bulk Up a bunch, saying even though Surging Strikes crits through it, like, with Dragon Terra, you don't do that much damage to me, but, yeah. I was, like, playing in a way to try to beat Urshifu in the early game, but my opponent did a really good job of not leading it. So, there's a reason why Urshifu Iron Hands Amoonguss won the World Championships in 2023. Okay. Yep, and they are Choice Scarf. That one did 36 damage. Okay. So, like, we survive, but at what cost, right? Because this next turn, my opponent can just go for Surging Strikes on the Flutter main and then Spore into the Okidogi slot. His Hisuian Arcanine might be something to have considered as well, because it could at least Extreme Speed. And if I actually had a Hisuian Arcanine for E-Speed right now, like, imagine I pivoted Arcanine in, then I could E-Speed this and put on Flare Blitz pressure at least. But now you can just Surging Strikes into this and Spore into this. Or even just Rage Powder, honestly. Okay, I'm not going to give up, though, because I think it's still potentially winnable. If they mess up and don't Rage Powder here and I get the knockout onto Urshifu, then it opens the door for Flutter main in this late game. But if they Rage Powder here, I just lose. Yeah, nicely done. And this is why, like, so many teams have Grass Terra, right? Amoonguss is just really scary Pokemon, and it's like, the problem for this matchup for us is that Surging Strikes kind of two-shots everything. I could have maybe considered bringing out my own Urshifu, but yeah, I think basically it kind of comes down to whether or not Ogerpon survives that turn. I do want to do the damage calc after this game, because I think this is a great example of a game in which, like, I'm going to lose, and if I were to go into the replay, I'd be like, okay, what went wrong? And the clear problem is that I was just completely dominated by Water Urshifu plus Amoonguss, and Ogerpon is the best solution against that in our team, but Ogerpon didn't have enough defense to survive, so this is a great example of when to reconsider your EV spreads, where I'd consider re-EVing Ogerpon to take that Surging Strikes a little bit better, and if there's any chance of survival, it's a really big deal, so yeah. They should just go for Rage Powder again here, and then another Surging Strikes at this point. And I just don't do enough damage. Yeah, I guess I'll bulk up here. But this is a game of me just getting completely cleared by Water Terror Urshifu. Which way Scarf? If it weren't Scarf, I think this also would look differently, because then Flutter would have been able to outpace and just KO with Dazzling Gleam. But yeah, I like knew that this was going to be a huge problem for us in the early game. But I was hoping my opponent would lead it, and they did a really good job of keeping it in the back. And Amoonguss is just such a problem here, because like I can't knock it out very easily, and our two best Amoonguss answers, in Ogerpon and Hisuian Arcanine, just get cleared by the Water Urshifu. So yeah, we've had some great games with Okidogi, but this one, it was not able to shine. But I think it's good to highlight these games, because I feel like Okidogi looked absolutely amazing in our first two matches, for example, and in this one it just wasn't able to provide us too much. So, the main thing I'm curious about is the Urshifu damage calc onto Ogerpon. So, yep, not much we can do here. Surging Strikes just outspeeds and KOs everything here. And I think the main adjustments I would consider is Grass Terra Hisuian Arcanine. That would have been perfect for that duo. So, another example of how you can modify your team, right? Because, like, the combination of Water Urshifu and Amoonguss actually is fairly common. It won the World Championships, right? And so, I would consider, like, yeah, in losses like this, it's like I lost to something that's pretty standard. I don't want to have a negative matchup against this. Like, what are the things I can do to improve the team? And Grass Terra, Hisuian Arcanine, and a more bulky Ogerpon to survive that Water Terra Surging Strikes are immediately the first two things that I can think of that would fix this problem substantially more. So let's pull up that damage calc. So, pulling up the damage calc, it's a 68.8% chance for the Urshifu to get a one-hit knockout onto the Ogerpon, so it's not really a very good damage roll, and, like, we could consider moving EVs out into more HP and defense, but to get a, good chance of surviving this attack requires a lot more investment, which doesn't feel great. So, looking at this, actually, then I'm like, maybe the solution isn't defensively EVing this, maybe it's just to change another Pokemon, and like I said, I think if it were Grass Terra, Hisuian Arcanine, that would have offered us a lot more value in this game, so I would have very much brought that, because it would have been the perfect answer into the combination of Iron Hands, Amoonguss, plus the Scarf Water Urshifu. Grass Terra gives us immunity to Spore, allows us to resist Surging Strikes, and then we could Terra Blast into the Urshifu plus Extreme Speed, for example, so that's kind of like the immediate fix that I would think about after playing this matchup specifically. But yeah, Okidogi just not able to really thrive in a matchup where our opponent has Urshifu, which can crit through our defense boost, as well as Amoonguss, which can just put us to sleep. Okay, we've got Cresselia, Blood Moon, Iron Hands, Water Ogerpon, Hisuian Arcanine, and Fluttermane. Feels like another decent Okidogi game. Might want to consider tearing that if we can clear Fluttermane. I think Iron Hands Fluttermane as a lead once again can be pretty problematic. So I'm okay with the Hisuian Arcanine Okidogi lead, I think, with Grimm in the back. And Flutter fourth again. Yeah, I don't think we really need Ogerpon here. I think Water Urshifu's decent, but I'm concerned about their Ogerpon being able to just redirect and soak up the Surging Strikes. So, yeah. Once again, the theory behind not leading Grimmsnarl here is that it's really bad into an Iron Hands plus Fluttermane lead, and Hisuian Arcanine here, very good. And if, even if they don't lead, for example, the Iron Hands plus Fluttermane, I think Arcanine is just really solid because it gets an Intimidate off into a lot of their attackers, like the Ogerpon, for example, and I can always just pivot out into Grimm. And if it is Iron Hands plus Flutter, it puts us in a decent spot. But it's going to be Cresselia and Ogerpon here. Okay, that's cool. I think against this, I am willing personally to just go straight from Arcanine into Grimmsnarl, Fairy Terra defensively, or sorry, Dragon Terra defensively with this, and then bulk up. Yeah. Grimm would have been perfectly fine as a lead here. I would have been able to go for something like Light Screen or Reflect, and then Terra, but I also think this is okay. quick Intimidate onto the Ogerpon. I switch out Arcanine to conserve Intimidate for later on. And I just start setting up with Okidogi. The main thing to consider is by going for this Terra now, if you do have back Flutter Mane, you can hit me for super effective damage. So that's one thing to be careful about. But I'm Terraing here because I really just don't want to take too much damage from like an immediate Psychic from Cresselia. I guess that's the other thing. Like, I didn't need to necessarily bulk up. I could have gone Protect to scout out for Psychic, and if you don't go for Psychic, then maybe you just don't even have it. Whereas I am now actually weak to Moonblast, right? They actually just go straight for Ivy Cudgel. Okay, that's fine. Sweet. Free bulk up. And they go for Trick Room. Yeah. So Terra, maybe not necessary, but if you're Trick Rooming there, that makes me think that you're not going to just pivot out into Flutter Mane, which is good for us. I'm honestly happy to bulk up again right now and then set up Light Screen this turn. This is the dream scenario for Okidogi in the sense that they don't have too much offensive pressure onto us and we can just keep setting up, right? Like, it's not rare for this thing to get 2, 3, 4 bulk ups throughout the course of a game. And what's awkward for my opponent right now is you're more or less forced to make a switch in order to really put on offensive pressure. This is, by the way, why Dragon Terror is popping up in usage, because Ogerpon, most of the Ogerpon forms just can't really do very much into us, right? So Cresselia actually pivots out, okay? Into Iron Hands. Yep, that's fine. Right now, all 3 of your Pokemon don't do very well into Okidogi. I would expect Blood Moon to be the final one here. Let's see. Yep. I call it Blood Moon. I know it's like Ursaluna Blood Moon, but it's just weird to also refer to it as Ursaluna. Yeah, so a perfect turn of setup for us here as they also waste a turn of Trick Room. And this also means no Flutter Mane, so the Dragon Terror is looking stronger now, basically. Okay. So we set up Light Screen, which is really important. I think this going for Ghost Terror can make some sense. You also have Heavy Slam pressure with this onto me here. Thinking about a third bulk up, honestly. I don't know if that's a little greedy. I'm down for it, though, I think, because I have so much sustain. So, like, I'm down a Parting Shot into Ursaluna here and then bulk up again. I don't want to just Drain Punch into Ursaluna out of fear that it's Ghost Terror this turn. And they just go for Fake Out. Okay, that's fine. Hyper Voice? Or just Blood Moon? Okay. Yep, that's not too much damage. You've got Throat Spray, but that's fine. We get another bulk up off. That was a risky turn by them, though. I could have just Drain Punched that slot. I thought they had to Terra there, but maybe they're just normal Terra, so they didn't want to go for that. I think normal Terra actually makes this pretty interesting, because even though I'm boosted up, you can go for your +1 Blood Moon into this slot. So I think this turn we go for Protect, and then Parting Shot into Ursaluna. I think one interesting adjustment you can make on this team, by the way, is making the Ogerpon a little bit less offensive with Follow Me. Could also be a different Ogerpon type, honestly. Because what I was thinking is if I had a defensive Ogerpon right now, it'd be perfect to Parting Shot, pivot into it, and then just go for Follow Me with it. But I'm just going to Parting Shot you, bring you back down to neutral. Still no Terra. Like, I think what I was worried about is something like a normal Terra, but this now grants me a free switch into Hisuian Arcanine. And late game Flutter Mane just with Dazzling Gleam pressure is also looking really good right now. So I'm feeling decent. We just have to make it through this next turn specifically. Yep, they go for Blood Moon. Okay. And Heavy Slam, that's fine. I mean, I don't think a neutral Blood Moon and a -1 attack knocks out Okidogi. I'm personally happy to Drain Punch into... this is actually an interesting scenario, because like I think I'd like to pivot out Hisuian Arcanine. They're just not going for the Terras at all, so it's like... That just makes me think you don't have Ghost Terra on this. So I'm down to Drain Punch into this slot. And Flare Blitz and Iron Hands. Okay, Ursaluna just protects. I mean, that's fine. You just stalled out your own Trick Room as a result. Drain Punch into us, doesn't KO. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think, like, Okidogi legitimately 1v4s my opponent's team from this point. We get Flare Blitz. Faint from Recoil, but that's fine. I think the main thing I want to show respect to is Ursaluna actually having that defensive Terra. Trick Room expires. They still haven't Terra'd yet. Like, I mean, that's just the one scary thing, right? I think I'm okay to just bring out Flutter Mane here, though. Yeah, with Light Screen still set up, I think here I'm happy to just go for Knockoff onto Iron Hands and Moonblast onto it. Because the idea is I want Flutter Mane to survive the turn. Iron Hands normally is going to be Assault Vested here. It's just kind of wild to me because they had Blood Moon in front of our Okidogi this whole time. Like, never went for a Terra, so I could have Drain Punched at any point. I also was thinking about switching Hisuian Arcanine out that previous turn, but I thought getting damage on the board was good with it. Because I don't think the Intimidate's actually that important at this point in the game. Okay, this is perfect. Let's see if they Terra Iron Hands. If not, I think we just probably win the game this turn. They didn't Terra. Okay. Cool. Yep, so Cresselia's the switch in. There's definitely no way they're Ghost Terra with Ursaluna, then. If I had to guess, it is probably the... That Cresselia is not defensive at all, right? Yeah, it probably has very little defense EVs. Because earlier in this episode, we saw the +3 knockoff not even KO Crest, whereas now a +2 knockoff got the KO. So, might just be one of those spreads that's like max HP, max special attack, for example. But that works out perfectly. The main thing was, like, I wasn't that threatened by Ursaluna because I knew that I brought you down back to neutral. Oh no, I am at +3 attack. Sorry, I forgot that I had the other bulk up. That's what I mean. You can set up so much with this. So, yeah. But even at +3, we didn't get the knockout until the previous Cresselia. So, yeah. That Cresselia, the first Cresselia we fought against, probably a little bit more defensive. Okay, you can still Terra either Mon right now. This can Ivy Cudgel. Got Grim in the back. Okay, I'm down to just Moonblast and, okay, they just follow me. Then I think the game is over here, unless... Even if you get a crit, I don't think you can win, because this just gets the knockout. I personally thought Ogerpon needed to Terra that turn, and just go for an attack instead. Cool. But, once again, this is... I think, like, Okidogi into these Trick Room-oriented teams in particular is just really good. And, yeah, Blood Moon there, even if it had normal Terra, would not have gotten the knockout, so that's good to know. I think if my opponent wanted to Terra, though, like, they had the opportunity to Terra either Iron Hands or the Ogerpon, and the lack of Terraing either, I think, punished them really heavily here. It's like, if you're going to hold on to your Terra, who are you holding it onto for? And, if they had Terra'd Iron Hands, they at least would have survived the Moonblast, and so I wouldn't have just gotten the one-hit knockdown onto Cresselia. Like, I think... This game actually could look really differently if my opponent followed this line, where you Terra your Iron Hands, you lose it that turn, but then the knockoff has to get targeted into Iron Hands. Then what you can do is bring out Ogerpon, follow me with Ogerpon, set up Trick Room with Cresselia, and then play the game from there. The reality, though, is I think they just had no adequate answer to deal with this Dragon Terra Okidogi. Like, this Pokemon legitimately can 1v4 teams, especially after it gets set up, because it has so much sustain via Drain Punch, and because they didn't bring... Flutter Mane either, there was just no way to really deal that much damage to us. Their best bet, of course, was going to be the Blood Moon, but you saw with Light Screen support and Party Shot support from Grimmsnarl, we were able to effectively deal with Blood Moon. So, yeah, this Pokemon is just absolutely amazing against the right team comps and legitimately can solo carry games. But it takes a little bit of setup to get there, so I guess, I need to give credit to Grimmsnarl and Hisuian Arcanine as well, right? It's really important to have the screen set up and have the Intimidate support as well, but yeah. Anyway, that's going to be it for this one, so thank you so much as always for joining me, and hopefully I have showcased the power of this Bulk Up Leftovers Okidogi set. I think we had an amazing performance with it. We're basically carried the first 2 games in this final game as well, and so, yeah, I think there are a lot of different ways to use this Pokemon, so I'm eager to see how other sets are built around it, but I think this plus Grimmsnarl plus the Hisuian Arcanine core is a really strong starting point. So, yeah, thanks as always for watching, leave a like if you enjoy, and I'll see you all next time. Alright, peace.